faithfully delivering value by interpreting the world's best books. Hello, this is Sally with Book Talk. Today, we're diving into a book called Robinson Crusoe. This is the renowned work by Daniel Defoe, an English writer from the Enlightenment period. Robinson Crusoe was published in 1719 and is considered Britain's first true modern novel. Before Defoe, English literature was mainly known for poetry and drama. Think of famous works like Shakespeare's plays from the 16th century and Milton's poetry from the 17th century. After Defoe, novels, particularly modernist novels, started to become more common. Thus, Defoe is undeniably the pioneer of British realist novels and is often called the father of the English and European novel. Robinson Crusoe indeed had a huge impact on English novels. Authors like Swift, who penned Gulliver's Travels, along with Austen, Dickens, Thackeray, Charlotte Bronte, Conrad, and Kipling, all 19th century English writers were influenced by this novel. The French writer Rousseau highly praised this novel and included it in his famous work, Emile, as essential reading for 15-year-olds. Before the 20th century, there were over 700 translations and adaptations of Robinson Crusoe. Today, it's even more popular globally, with film and TV adaptations constantly emerging. And it's, for instance, in 1946, the Soviet Union produced the world's first color, sound, and stereoscopic film based on Robinson Crusoe. In 1996, renowned director George Miller also made a film adaptation. In 2016, Belgium and France produced an animated film. Clearly, Robinson Crusoe is a masterpiece in the world's literary treasure. So, what kind of story is this? Let's start with a brief summary. Our hero, Robinson Crusoe, was eager to seek adventure overseas, but unexpectedly, he faced a shipwreck during his voyage, becoming the sole survivor. He was swept onto an island, all alone. Facing the harsh environment, he crafted tools, foraged for food, and constantly confronted survival threats. Moreover, grappling with inner loneliness, he lived on the island for 28 years before finally spotting a passing ship. At that moment, Robinson was finally rescued and left the island. It sounds like a straightforward tale of survival on a deserted island. But why does it have such enduring classic status in literary history? So what adventures did Robinson encounter in his seafaring life? What was his life like on the deserted island? Below, we'll explore Robinson's overseas fantasy adventure in 3 parts. First, let's look at the first part of the novel, which mainly tells about Robinson's experience leaving home to sail. The novel is written in the first person. At the beginning, the protagonist Robinson introduces himself, saying, "In 1632, I was born into an upper-class family in York." Robinson's father did business in England and accumulated a fortune. Settling in York, his father planned Robinson's life path: stay in his hometown, rely on introductions from friends and relatives, establish himself in society, and through his own efforts and diligence, earn a fortune to live a comfortable and happy life. However, young Robinson was somewhat rebellious. He didn't buy into his father's plan. This predictable life wasn't what Robinson wanted. He urgently wanted to see the world overseas. In 1651, during a trip, 19-year-old Robinson secretly left his hometown and, with a friend, embarked on an overseas adventure. However, Robinson's seafaring career wasn't smooth. His first 3 voyages were quite thrilling. He encountered a storm at sea, nearly perishing, and on the way to Africa, he met pirates who captured him and forced him to be a servant. In Africa, while out fishing unnoticed, Robinson escaped alone in a small boat from the pirates' place and took along a young black slave. And during his escape, he was rescued by a large ship heading to Brazil and went with it to Brazil. He stayed there sold the young black slave, and bought a plantation. Over the years, Robinson managed the plantation successfully and lived a wealthy life as a landowner in Brazil. But Robinson wasn't satisfied with this. He discussed trafficking black slaves with other plantation owners, and they planned to get a ship to bring slaves back from Africa, leading to his fourth voyage. This time, their ship hit a reef near South America and sank. Everyone on board perished except Robinson. As the book writes, I suddenly hit a rock, which made me completely lose consciousness and unable to move. Turns out, the impact hit my chest directly, knocking me out. Before the second wave hit, I had regained consciousness, tightly hugging a rock, holding my breath as much as possible. He waited until the waves subsided and steadied himself in the water. When he lifted his head from the water, an island appeared before him. Thus, we enter the second part of the novel, where Robinson begins his survival experience on the deserted island. This is the most fascinating part of the novel. After the thrilling escape from death, Robinson faced immense survival challenges. Facing the unfamiliar, uninhabited island and a desperate survival situation, he quickly began to calmly consider what to do next. It's clear that Robinson is not only full of adventurous passion, but also possesses survival rationality. However, all he had with him was a knife, a pipe, and some tobacco. How could he survive with just these? Robinson's first thought was to climb a tree to spend the night, as this could protect him from wild animal attacks. Before climbing the tree, he found several small streams, drank some fresh water, then used some tobacco to stave off hunger. He slept soundly in the tree all night. Since his sea voyages began, he hadn't enjoyed such sweet sleep in a long time. The next morning, Robinson had to solve his food and shelter problems. He saw the large ship from his voyage stranded in the bay and immediately thought of going to it to get food and tools. He found grains, bread, biscuits, sugarcane wine, and also a toolbox with guns and ammunition. These supplies were treasures. He gathered some planks from the ship, tied them into a raft, and made multiple trips to transport these items ashore. This was a very exhausting task. On the last trip, his raft was too heavy and capsized in the water, causing him to lose a lot of supplies. He quickly thought again to survey the island's terrain and find a suitable place to build a house, considering the choice of a residence. It required careful thought. First, hygiene with fresh water. Second, shade from the sun. Third, protection from fierce animals. Fourth, a view of the sea so he could call for help if any ships passed by. He found a small, flat area beside a hillside with a recess in the rock wall. Robinson drove a row of wooden stakes in front of this rock like a fence, with the entrance on top, accessible by a ladder. He transported all the supplies inside the fence, made a roof at the top with tarpaulin, and had a bed to sleep on, a hammock he brought from the ship. After all this was arranged, the provisions Robinson had brought from the ship were nearly exhausted. What could he do? Later, he discovered wild goats on the island and shot some with his musket for food, temporarily solving his food problem. By chance, seeds that had spilled from a food bag sprouted during the rainy season, wheat and rice. Gazing at the tender green seedlings, Robinson shed tears of excitement. So Robinson collected seeds and began expanding his crop cultivation. Gradually, he secured a stable grain supply. On the other side of the island, he found a fruit grove with abundant grapes and lemons. Overjoyed, he built another hut there. It became his countryside villa. The island was rich in resources. Robinson occasionally stole turtle eggs and caught birds to enhance his diet with flavor and nutrition. As his ammunition dwindled, he considered domesticating wild goats. He trapped goats with snares, even building a wooden fenced enclosure to breed them, ensuring a steady supply of mutton and goat milk. Eventually, Robinson owned over 40 goats. His farming and herding thrived through clever exploration. On the island, he daily mastered new crafts, becoming a farmer to grow and harvest wheat, then grinding it into flour. He experimented with pottery, crafting clay pots and jars like primitive cookware. Then he transformed into a baker, constructing a special oven for bread. He boasted, "I bake my barley bread so well it rivals any from the world's finest ovens." Soon after, I actually trained myself into a skilled baker. I even made pastries with rice. Eating bread and cakes on a deserted island felt miraculous. For shelter, Robinson trained as a craftsman. He roasted mutton, baked bread, and sewed hats, coats, and an umbrella from goatskin. It could be said Robinson now possessed all life's necessities. In his sixth year, he built a canoe, only to find he couldn't launch it into the sea. He had to spend another 2 years digging a canal to the sea. Following this canal, he sailed his canoe to the coast, occasionally making short voyages nearby or inspecting his island like a king, filled with pride. He marked days by carving notches on a post, one per day. In his 15th year on the island, Robinson's peace shattered when he found traces of cannibals, human skulls and hand bones, a fire site, and a pit resembling a cockfighting ring. Probably those savages sat there feasting brutally on their own kind. They were savages from beyond the island, landing in canoes, which terrified Robinson. If encountered, their numbers could overwhelm him in an instant. He'd likely be eaten. Robinson urgently found a deeply hidden cave as his new shelter, setting multiple traps for protection. But long after seeing them were savages, he instead felt profound loneliness. Until year 2004, when another savage group arrived, with captives to kill and eat. Robinson resolved to defend his territory. Secretly aiming his gun near the savages, he lurked until suddenly a captive broke free and ran toward him. And savages chased immediately. At the critical moment, Robinson shot them dead, saving the captive on a Friday. So Robinson named the captive Friday, who thanked him for saving his life. Seeing the musket's power, he trembled, utterly terrified, nearly collapsing. He became Robinson's loyal servant and friend, thenceforth. Initially, this savage still drooled over corpses, but Robinson cured his cannibalism, taught him English. Civilizing a savage proved harder than conquering nature. Yet, Robinson succeeded. Later, more savages came with captives. Among them was Friday's father. Thus, Robinson and Friday waged a fierce battle against them. In the end, Robinson and his group won, increasing the island's population and expanding their plantation. But the most crucial thing was still seeking help. At the same time, they were also preparing to build a large ship to leave the island. Several years later, Robinson's long-awaited savior finally arrived. A British merchant ship anchored near the island. Mutineers planned to abandon the captain and two others on the island and seize the ship. Robinson and Friday helped the captain subdue the mutineers and recapture the vessel. As thanks, the captain took them off the island. So Robinson was about to leave the island after living there for 28 years, feeling understandably sad. He thought of his companions, realizing he'd never see them again. Thus we come to the third part, the novel's conclusion. It recounts Robinson escaping the island and returning to England. Since the mutineers committed piracy and would be hanged if they returned, Robinson left them on the island, teaching them survival and management. Afterward, he took Friday, the captain, and others back to England on the merchant ship. By then, Robinson had been away 35 years, and his parents had passed away. Later, he visited his Brazilian plantation. Despite his 28-year absence, friends there faithfully managed it for him. Now, a wealthy man with thousands of pounds, he could live comfortably in retirement. He married and had 3 children in England. Later, Robinson sailed again. Passing his former island, he saw sailors and Spaniards left there, thriving, in a prosperous community. Robinson sent new immigrants, distributed land, left supplies, and departed the island satisfied. The novel ends here. Defoe supposedly wrote Robinson Crusoe after hearing a true story. That was in September 1704, when a Scottish sailor quarreled with his captain. Abandoned by the captain on an Atlantic island, he lived there over 4 years before rescue. By then, he'd nearly forgotten human language and became completely wild. Defoe was inspired. Based on this news, he created the character Robinson, thus giving us Robinson Crusoe as we know it today. Robinson's experiences epitomize Britain's overseas expansion during the 16th and 17th centuries. During Defoe's lifetime, British capitalism began large-scale development, with immigration expansion entering a golden age. Robinson was part of this immigration wave. His rebellious spirit and fervent desire for adventure perfectly reflect the ethos of British colonial expansion. The name Robinson in English carries connotations of independent enterprise. The author's choice clearly held deeper significance. Robinson fearlessly pursued overseas exploration, from being stranded to conquering the island, truly building an independent enterprise. He brought modern civilization to the wild island, ultimately transforming it into a British colony. Robinson thus represents not just an individual, but an entire era of British colonial expansion. With his world-conquering ambition, perseverance, and fighting spirit, he became a hero revered by that era. Upon Robinson's return, his homeland had transformed beyond recognition. Vast spatial shifts dissolving classical geographical isolation. People viewed overseas visitors as coming from fairy tale realms. The novel spans from England to Africa, South America, even Asia. This tens of thousands mile spatial dimension embodies colonial modernity. Friday 2 bears marks of backward nations swept into expansion. Swept into history's new currents, they stumbled forward, dragged onto modernization's path. Simultaneously, Robinson Crusoe champions reason and affirms self-worth. As part of Europe's Enlightenment, early 18th century British literature saw Robinson's adventurous spirit in voyages and survival, making people rediscover their value. Had Robinson not sailed, he might have lived leisurely like his father, but adventure's call finally drove him away. Robinson's overseas ventures shone with rationalism. Always knowing his goals, he sought fortune through adventure. He bought a Brazilian plantation and planned to traffic slaves from Africa. Stranded on the island, every self-rescue step he took was based on clear awareness. Even in the most desperate situations, he would regulate his emotions and rationally analyze his circumstances. He said, "My reason can now gradually control my disappointment." Thus, I began comforting myself by comparing current advantages and disadvantages, accepting my fate. Like commercial bookkeeping's debit credit format, I fairly listed my fortunes or misfortunes. Disadvantage: I'm on a terrifying deserted island with no hope of rescue. Advantage: I'm alive, not drowned like shipmates. Rational thought action ultimately made him the island's true master. In modern civilization's conquest of backward cultures, immigrants often had multiple identities: explorer, merchant, pirate, making evaluation complex. Crusoe was literature's first positive bourgeois figure, praised for his rational ability to adapt and conquer nature. Through painstaking farming, husbandry, and construction, he transformed the island into paradise with his own hands. Robinson embodied reason's great power, precisely where human value lies. To Robinson, the line between civilization and savagery was reason. He taught Savage Friday to abandon cannibalism, speak English, and believe in God. He often reflected himself sincerely thanking God for island blessings, renewing his faith. Thus, Robinson established civilized order on the island. This is why critic Edward Said considered Robinson Crusoe the prototype of realist novels. He said this novel didn't accidentally tell of a European establishing his fiefdom on a distant non-European island. Its protagonist is a new world creator who rules and owns the land. Yet Robinson's created or ruled world also prompts reflection on modern civilization. In modern civilization, tap water flows instantly, lights turn on with switches, meals come from markets, specialized labor makes life increasingly convenient. Individual life is built upon the functioning of the entire social machinery. Robinson raises this question. When civilization abandons you, how would you survive? Alone on a tiny deserted island. The tools he used still came from the shipwreck, products of civilized society. He asked himself, what if I had no gun, no ammunition, no tools for making things, no clothes, bedding, tent, or any covering? What would I do? In this isolated environment, Robinson's soul underwent purification. He said, my understanding has become vastly different from before. Here I'm free from all worldly sins. I have no carnal desires or vanity of life, for everything I possess is sufficient for my enjoyment. Distance from human society led Robinson to reevaluate his life and reflect on his own desires and vanity. By discarding these, he attained inner tranquility. Thus, after returning to England from the island and living there a while, Robinson prepared for new voyages, possibly never to return. Robinson Crusoe pioneered a wave of maritime adventure novel imitations in literary history. French writer Michel Tournier's Friday or the Limbo of the Pacific parodies Robinson Crusoe, diverging in content yet echoing its ending. While Defoe's novel shows Robinson civilizing a savage, Tournier depicts Robinson shedding civilization under savage influence, ultimately rejecting modern society. Through this, Tournier presents reflection on so-called modern civilization. The 2000 film Castaway by 21st Century Fox, starring Tom Hanks, serves as a modern Robinson Crusoe adaptation, telling an engineer's story after a plane crash strands him on an island. Living tenaciously alone for 4 years before rescue, his island experience became a spiritual baptism that transformed his understanding of life. The film gained immense popularity after release and won an Academy Award the following year. All these sequels and parodies have profoundly enriched Robinson Crusoe's meaning, precisely where its enduring charm lies. Robinson's legend continues. He is like the hero Odysseus in Homer's epic, his journey home long and helpless. He faced beasts, storms, cannibals, and wars, finally returning home. The mythic era faded, and a world of drastic change birthed a new heroic epic. Robinson's solitary legendary experience also mirrored the era he lived in. While exploring the outer world, he found his inner self, conquering both nature and himself. In this sense, Robinson Crusoe is like a prophecy, an apocalypse, inspiring us to forge ahead like Robinson amid modern life's busyness and fatigue, ultimately realizing our life value. Well, that concludes our interpretation of Robinson Crusoe. Listening notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.